Well, once again, I want to welcome you to this season of Advent, this time in which we make ourselves ready for not just the tasks that are at hand, but make us ready for a time to come when we will receive the fullness of God's grace and glory, not just in our lives, but throughout our communities, in fact, the ends of the cosmos. I think about this hopeful imagery that pops up during the Advent season, and it is such a contrast to maybe what we all are feeling here at this time in our lives. Is it too much to say that we all, in our own way, feel tired and weary? In fact, maybe that our motivation for a lot of life is sort of at low ebb right now. It is something that we have been hearing quite a bit as we watch the news or listen to something on the radio or read on our news feeds, that folks are just plain old tired. That the pandemic and all that has been associated with this year has just sort of ground us down. And we go to bed at night, weary to the bone, cast ourselves asleep, and then get up and look for some type of energy or motivation for the new day. Kirsten, Keegan, and I have been watching The Lord of the Rings here this past week as part of sort of our Thanksgiving week. It's a little bit, hopefully, of a tradition. I grew up reading The Lord of the Rings, and now, since I'm in a new day and age, I've got to watch it and then maybe go read it. But as we have been watching, I can't help but think, as I see Sam and Frodo stumbling through Mordor, making an incredible effort just to keep their feet moving as they try to get to their goal of casting the ring into the fire. It sort of seems to me to be an appropriate image for what a lot of us are experiencing now. We may not be going to cast a ring away, but we still bear the burden of this time that we are in. I mean, maybe to put it a different way here at the beginning of Advent is as this pandemic rages and case numbers increase and the number of dead keeps rising, you know, it sort of just reaches out and grabs you and drags you down to the ground. During this week of Thanksgiving, it has become clear to me how lonely I am for my fuller family. I'm blessed to have Kirsten and Keegan in the house, and we make quite a little trio moving in and through our daily lives. But I understand the need to gather with the fullness of our family and friends, and yet it is a difficult thing to do this time of year, and that begins to weigh me down or drag me down. And then you add on top of that, at least I do, watching the crowds at airports, few people wearing masks, it seems, and then hearing stories of folks who think that this whole pandemic thing is just make-believe, it's not real. That also drags me down and wears me out. I become more and more tired as I see and hear these things, and I can't even begin to know what it is like to be a healthcare worker right now, a doctor or a nurse or an aide in the midst of a COVID unit. When you walk out the door of the hospital and you've been with people who have died, and then you see people all around treating it like it's nothing. And you remember that phone call that you made to tell a family member that someone has died. it just makes you weary to the bone. And I hope the experts are wrong, that in the next 2 or 3 weeks, that we're going to see an explosion of death. I hope they are wrong. And yet, it is something like Isaiah says, we seem to be doing to ourselves. Isaiah writes, "There is no one who calls on your name or attempts to take hold of you, for you have hidden your face from us and have delivered us into the hand of our iniquity," our own doing. Turning away from God and from each other, the hurts of the world rise all around us. However, in the midst of even this sort of tiring and wearisome bleakness, there's this word of promise and hope. Isaiah says, "Yet, O Lord, you are our Father. We are the clay and you are the potter, and we all are the work of your hand." An amazing sense of promise. We all of us, in the midst of our weariness and our iniquities, we are being trained for something better, shaped to be a different people by a loving God, shaped to be a people who love God and who actually do love our neighbor. The ministry that Jesus came to model and describe and to impart to us. A ministry in which we have been entrusted. We are being shaped to do the things we know we are supposed to do. I should say maybe to do the things that we have been entrusted with and trained for. Even here in the midst of this wearisome and bone-tiring pandemic, we do what we have been trained to do. We drag ourselves out of bed in the morning. We make breakfast. We get kids ready for school, which is just a couple feet away from where they ate. We kind of gird ourselves for the day, and we put on our mask, and we go forth out to do those few things we still do right now, like go shopping or pick up a prescription at the pharmacy. We do what we have been entrusted to do and trained for. And then we come home and we put on a smile. We make the kids dinner. We get them to bed. And we start all over again. Earlier in my life, and with much more vigor, I learned something about what to do during this time of the year, this Advent season. I remember the things that I had been trained to do and sort of shaped to be about. Putting up the Christmas lights, getting the tree ready. It seems like I've been hearing stories that people this year are doing it earlier and with a lot more vigor. It's almost as if people are doing the things that they know will help them get ready for something better. And as Savannah said, a lot of us are focused on what's going to happen at Christmas, but maybe, just maybe this year, the lights are going up earlier and the trees are being decorated, not just in the hope of what will come at the end of December, but a hope of what will come next spring or summer, when a vaccine begins to make its appearance. And we just begin to dare that maybe, just maybe, we'll be able to push away from this thing that has weighed us down so much this year. Isn't it amazing how other people train us and entrust to us things that are important to them, and then they become important to us? I remember my dad teaching me how to mow the yard as I got to an age and size where I could handle the lawnmower in the yard. I remember him teaching me about putting up Christmas lights, about checking each bulb. This is in the olden days before LEDs. You had to check each bulb and make sure you didn't whack them along the side of the house because they would explode all over the place. I remember being entrusted by my father with as I got older, the climbing up of the ladder and hooking the light strings on the hooks on the house. And then as I grew older, being entrusted with the car to go to the store and buy groceries, things that my mom and dad had been training me to do, all of those younger years of my life. And as I step back from that time now, long ago, it seems like 40 plus years, that they believed in me, that I could climb that ladder safely, that I could string those lights with care, that I could make it to the store and back, without losing that cash that they gave me or without wrecking the car. They believed in me. Think about the times in your lives, our lives, when someone has believed in us, and their belief in us has changed who we are, made us better, made us more confident, actually created within us the ability to go forth and do the very things they believe that we can do. It was empowering. Just yesterday, Keegan and I were outside putting up Christmas lights. And I taught him how to go up and down the ladder. And even though the LED lights can get banged around a little more than those old style ones, he was still careful as he went and strung the wire hook by hook. Those kinds of things we learn early in our lives. Things that Keegan is learning now. We carry into older, our more mature years, like how to do a job, how to form a relationship. And in the midst of this coronavirus, as difficult as it has been, we are doing the work that has been entrusted to us. And for the most part, as tired as we are, the stories that I'm hearing and we're telling each other, it may not seem like we're doing it very well. Actually, we are. We are. For the most part, food is on the table. The kids have clean clothes. We turn on our computer and we start that next Zoom meeting. And you know what? We may not smile as we do it, but we're doing it. We've been doing it pretty well. And so, as dreadful as this pandemic has been, let us not cut ourselves short. Let us take some comfort that the things our parents entrusted to us, the things our grandparents and our whole constellation of families have entrusted to us, we've actually been doing pretty well. Jesus had his own time and place with his family, with his disciples, to train them and entrust to them a ministry that they had to do. And he did so in the midst of the approach of a dreadful vision. I mentioned earlier watching The Lord of the Rings, and so with Frodo we might say, especially this year during this time of pandemic, I wish none of this had happened. Over against which Gandalf says, with wise words, so do all who live to see such times. But that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to us. And And so Jesus says to his disciples then and to his disciples now, each and every one of us, this is the time that is given to you. This is your time. And it will come, as he says in our gospel today, after much suffering and in a great shaking of the cosmos. He says to us that in this time he will appear to us and gather his faithful ones together. And there is a lesson for all of us to be learned in the midst of it. You may experience barrenness and a fruitless winter, but a summer of fruitful promise is approaching. Hope is out there on the horizon. And the issue for us is not to think about when this is going to happen, but how to make oneself ready for it. To lean into the fact that it will come. And to take to heart his words that as he gathers his faithful followers, he has given us a duty to do, work to be in charge of. We have been placed in charge, he says. It is an amazing gift. God believes in us. Jesus believes in us. And God has entrusted us in this day and age, during this pandemic, to do the ministry that Jesus has taught us to do. We were meant to have Jesus' ministry. And that is an encouraging thought. As I grew into middle school and early high school, my family experienced its own share of stresses and issues. There was unemployment, there was tension and strife within the family. But those early lessons of putting up Christmas lights that my dad taught me were well learned. And so when we didn't have much money except for what I had from my paper route, I would take the bus downtown. I remember putting the quarter in the little jar that held the bus fares, and I would ride the bus downtown, and I would go into the drugstore to buy little replacement lights. Red and green and yellow and blue. And because I had spent more money really than I had, I would walk home and not take the bus. And I would go outside and get the ladder and get the strings of lights. And I would test the bulbs, and I would put new ones in. And I would string them just like I had been taught. Because it's amazing. What we learn really does pour forth from us during the tough times. We do what has been entrusted to us, whether it's by our parents, our extended families, or by God. We do the ministry that Jesus has called us to do. Why is that? Because like our parents, he believes in us. And I believe that we have been doing these things quite well during this time of pandemic. Yes, we cannot meet in person for worship. Some of our grand events like God's Work, Our Hands, that we do so wonderfully together have not been able to be done. And yet, just this last week, over 30 households of Messiah came together to bring donations for the 24 days of Thanksgiving. And people are giving generously to the Christmas hamper program. And our Building a Culture of Generosity activity that we've been doing all fall is bearing much fruit. See, we are doing pretty well. So let's not be too hard on each other or ourselves. Yes, we're tired. Yes, it seems like it's all we can do to get out of bed and meet the new day. But that's not what God sees. God sees a faithful people doing the work that God has entrusted to us. And the only thing that we've been asked to do is to be ready to see ourselves as God sees us. Faithful workers of God's kingdom. Thanks be to God.